So the Chicago Bears certainly had an eventful draft. They might have had the most eventful draft out of all 32 teams. So they have to be talked about here. Let's break down, all of their picks. We'll start off with the biggest one, obviously. Justin Fields is a Chicago Bear. And this is interesting. I do feel like, I don't know if I've ever seen a player who seemingly fans just universally like. I don't see very many people commenting that have anything wrong with Fields. I have some issues, but I do also recognize the good in him. So we're going to mostly focus on the good. The reality is going after a guy like Justin Fields, who, again, his ceiling is certainly very high. And the reality is Chicago, they need a quarterback. So getting someone like Fields, who at his best could absolutely end up being a franchise quarterback, that's a good move, I think. And it's kind of, I feel like the way I've described this entire draft for Chicago is desperate times cause for desperate measures. You have Matt Nagy, who might be in his last year. So why not go out and see if you can get a star quarterback? And it's actually a little bit reminiscent of the Deshaun Watson move, right? When Houston traded up to get Deshaun Watson because they felt like they were a good team but needed a quarterback. Obviously, now it doesn't look so good with his sexual assault allegations and rape allegations, but that's besides the point. Back to Justin Fields, who seems like definitely none of that stuff is the case. He's just, the comparison is just that you're trading up to get a guy who a lot of people are fans of, but kind of has fallen out of grace a little bit right before the draft. They also go out and get Tevin Jenkins, who is interesting. So, he's 6'6", 320 pounds, but little arms, below 33-inch arms, which is, you usually want it to be, it's barely below. It's 32 and 7/8. So it's a little bit, it's not like he has baby T-Rex arms. It's just that he's, a little bit on the lower side. You'd like that to be above 33, which that is something that apparently matters. That's something that carries over pretty well. So I haven't actually done the data myself on that, but that's just what people say in NFL circles, and I'll believe them. So that's kind of the concern that they have. I should make a video on that and really see how true that is, but maybe someday. So he might not be the longest tackle out of all the top tier tackles. He might not have the best feet, but he does have good feet. And what he might have the best of is just his hands. He has really quick hands. And so he is absolutely a first round talent. Getting him in the second round, he made my top 5 offensive lineman list, not just tackles, but offensive linemen in general. So getting him here with a second round pick, they had to trade up to get him as well. But you know what? It's a position of need, and they got a really good player. Now, the tackle position wasn't necessarily like this completely awful situation for them because they did have a Fetty, they had Charles Leno Jr. So to have a couple of guys who can, be fine, I would say they're both kind of that league average type tackle, which you'd like an improvement on. So getting someone who could potentially be like that franchise left tackle, it's a great pick. I have no issues with this. I have some small quibbles with Justin Fields, no issues with Tevin Jenkins here. It's great value. And again, you got to protect your quarterback. Give Fields a chance here. That's what they're trying to do. And Fields should have a pretty good offensive line now, as maybe you can move one of those tackles in the guard. The real issue last year was just they had so many injuries, especially to the interior offensive line. So this could hopefully help with that. Getting another guy in the room and getting a day one starter in the room. Then they didn't have a pick until the 5th round. So, big delay there. But the guy they got was Larry Borom in the 5th round, who, again, to me, it just seems like he's the kind of guy where they needed some depth last year when they had some injuries. It really was a mess. So getting a guy who, he can play guard, he can play tackle, just a depth piece. This makes sense. Absolutely worth a 5th round pick. Then for round 6, we have Khalil Herbert, which I'm not sure if they needed a halfback. They have Damian Williams, Tariq Cohen, and David Montgomery. So getting a 4th running back, to me, he feels like a special teams guy. So that's kind of the hope. Bit of a surprise because it's not an area of need. But again, sometimes it's not just about need. It's about who's the best player available. And, around 6 and 7, these types of rounds, you tend to go after sort of guys that are special teamers a lot of times. So that's probably what they're doing here, just getting a special teams guy. Number 6, this is kind of just taking a flyer on number 6. Round 6, Daz Newsome. There's multiple round 6 guys, so I don't know why I started that like that. But Daz Newsome, is someone who I definitely could see being an okay player. Like clearly, this is just like, hey, let's see if we can sort of get something good. And I'm always in favor of drafting sort of these skill position guys that fall late in rounds because they tend to actually turn into NFL players more frequently than say, something like an offensive lineman. They tend to be out of the league in a couple years. So getting someone like that as Newsome, yes, they have a crowded wide receiver room, but they don't necessarily have a ton of stars other than, obviously they have a couple. Allen Robinson is great and Darnell Mooney looks good. So this is just sort of trying to find some other guy. Anthony Miller's fine as well. So it's not like they're bad. Marquise Goodwin, Javon Wims, Riley Ridley are the other guys. So getting someone who can maybe be like a wide receiver 3 or could be out of the league, it's a flyer, but when you have extra 6th-round picks, why not take a flyer? They then drafted a corner, Thomas Graham Jr., which, listen, corner, that's a position of need for them. It is, which sounds weird because we still have this mindset of like they have a good defense. But you look at their cornerback right now, you have Jalen Johnson, you have Desmond Trufant, Duke Shelley. I don't know exactly how good some of these guys are going to be. And so while the rest of their defense looks good, if you can't cover, that could be an issue. And, with Eddie Jackson, who, let's just be honest, is a fine safety, but he hasn't really been what he was ever since Vic Fangio left. And I'm not sure if that's his fault or what, but he's not a bad player, but he's just not like that elite safety that we saw with Vic Fangio. He hasn't been, at least. So that's an issue. And I think this is kind of one of those, hey, if worst case scenario happens, we want to just have another guy in the room, get another corner here. So spending a 6th-round pick, that makes some sense to me. And then round 7, you have, it looks like, I'm not sure if that's just Chris or a Kairos. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. Tonga. That seems like I could get it right. Well, that, a couple ways you can pronounce that as well. So apologies. But, it's kind of the thing where he's clearly a depth guy, trying to see if he can make the roster. But he's a big guy, 6'2", 325 pounds. They don't need a starter here, but you don't draft guys in the 7th round expecting them to be starters unless you're a poorly ran team. So getting a guy who can be a solid, depth piece makes sense. Not too much analysis. Some of these later picks are guys that I haven't watched too much film on. I'm kind of just going with what I've read. But, the two main guys, Tevin Jenkins and Justin Fields, I'm, well researched on. And I'm going to say that this is a pretty good draft. So on my podcast, I'm going to do like it, love it, meh, dislike it, or hate it. To me, this is a like it. I'm still not as sold on Justin Fields as some other people. Sorry. I know everyone wants me to love Justin Fields. He seems like a cool guy, whatever. But there are issues. I've talked about it in my whole video. I've broken it down. He does have kind of an awkward arm angle. His arm, the way he throws the football, it seems like almost every throw he's doing sort of something different, which can lead to some inaccuracies. I know that he has an impressive highlight reel, but a lot of people had an impressive highlight reel. Josh Rosen did as well. And you look at Justin Fields, there are just some things that he's going to have to learn quickly. That's really what it comes down to. He's not a can't-miss prospect. But again, to me, the reason why I still say I like this draft is the pros outweigh the cons, and the upside is a lot better than the downside. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that's my thought on this draft. Stay tuned. I have plenty more of these types of videos coming. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.